Okay, if someone is thirsty and they're dehydrated, what if you gave them salt water or a Coca-Cola or a coffee? They might initially get their thirst quenched, but it's not actually going to quench their thirst. That's kind of what's happening with the First Nations, indigenous topic, this residential schools topic, that people are angry because there was an injustice. There was a massive injustice. Like, Jesus is saying, hey, I didn't tell anyone to go and take people's children. When Jesus talked to the disciples, the original apostles and disciples 2,000 years ago he said, go into all the world and preach the good news to people. Tell people that they're loved, they're forgiven, tell them to love one another. So, and that they need forgiveness, that I actually paid their karma and their debt, and that there's now in me no condemnation, but you have to forgive each other, love one another. So I'm loving my First Nations brothers and sisters right now by sharing that there is the pendulum has swung into a twisted, diluted narrative, which is this, it's like a spirit actually behind it. There's this zeitgeist. The word zeitgeist is a German word that was like an influencing mindset that people can get, and they got it in the Nazi time. And that zeitgeist in Nazi time, in the 30s in Germany, caused people to be thinking that their race was better than another race. And that caused a lot of problems, as we know. So why would we be wanting to promote to a people, your race is better than another race? Oh yeah, those people are the bad ones. And you'd never do anything like that. Yours is perfect. I used to buy into that. I used to have romantic notions. I was raised, my mom took me to powwows out in the foothills in the Rocky Mountains. And I loved the First Nations culture. I loved the drumming. I loved the singing. I love my brothers and sisters, the dancing. And I would imagine like being on the prairies with my teepee and my family, having my buffalo skin tent or whatever. All of the sort of romantic notions that a young person has, and running around on horseback, hunting buffalo. Anyways, as nice as it sounds, this sort of utopia, it's really dangerous to promote that if it's not historical. It's like promoting something that's inaccurate. And when there's lies, it's dangerous. Like if I fixed your car and I did something inaccurately, I put wires to attach to different stuff, it might not work. Or, I fixed your brakes and I didn't do it accurately. There's a problem. Your brakes might not work. There's a problem when people are functioning on a system that's inaccurate. So I'm not advocating or condoning the residential schools or anything. I'm not into the institutional, tradition-based, man-made religious system, institution, all that. Babylon is falling, as you can see in the media. And the evil parts of the twisted system are being exposed. But it's really dangerous. The pendulum can swing to the other way, and all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, those white people are the bad people. That is not healthy. If I love somebody, I don't want them to think like that. I don't want people to think those black people or those native. It's like, that's actually racist, and it's racist one way or the other. And also, it's really dangerous because if people think, well, if I could just go back in time to before the Europeans got here, everything would be perfect. Or we can just take our culture back and we can have enough money and land. We don't want the European system. But we'll take all the money and the land that we can get, and then we'll have our culture, and then everything will be okay. But if that's not actually the solution, then you're actually encouraging somebody to go down a road that's ultimately not going to help them. And if you look at the culture, if you look at the history of the First Nations, not only in North America, but around the world, everyone was messed up. Not just in Indonesia. I mean, everybody knows about the Polynesian headhunters that were cannibals. Did you know there was cannibalism in Canada? First Nations. Did you know that there was human sacrifice? Did you know there was slavery? The Coast Salish people took slaves. They fought back and forth from Vancouver Island to Tsawwassen. They would go over and raid villages, take prisoners, slaves. There was all sorts of nasty stuff between the Huron and the Iroquois. There was a major massacre that happened in the 1600s, like way before colonialization. There was, well, it was starting around that time, but there was massacres that happened between the Cree and the Blackfoot and the Sioux over in the, where Lakota, the Bow Valley actually, that were before Europeans got there. These are just a taste of what was going on the world, all over the world. In Africa, the Africans had slaves of each other before any sort of Europeans showed up and started. The way the Europeans got slaves was they would buy the African slaves who were slaves of other Africans from other tribes. And so what we need to realize is that the whole world, like the Bible says, everyone from the original humans, Adam and Eve, they sinned, they disobeyed God, they rebelled, and things went downhill. And we're all broken. And trying to fix it by saying our group is better and we're just going to go back to our little ways of the past, and of trying to, if people actually knew about what those ways were like, not many of the women would want to go back to many of those tribes. There was some matriarchal tribes. There was some tribes that were led by chiefs that were honorable and responding to the light that was in them. Just like there was King Akashoka, I think his name is, in India in 200 BC. He was a good king. He did a pretty good job. He was influenced by Buddhism, which I used to be really into. And there's some gold nuggets of truth there about the realization of the temporariness of things on earth and the vanity, the meaninglessness, the suffering of the earthly experience. Now, Buddha didn't know about the prophecies of redemption. Buddha didn't know about the Hebrew scriptures and the promise of a Messiah, and that there's going to be a kingdom of love, and that there's going to be a restoration of everything on earth. There's going to be no more wars, no more sickness. So Buddha was like, oh, life is suffering. Just don't get attached to anything and take the middle path, be empty. But this King Akashoka, he was influenced, and so he ended up being a good king. So there was tribes, there was chiefs, there was even nations in other parts of the world that had some times of having relative peace. But in general, if you study history, you would probably not want me to say, okay, I'll put you in a time machine and we'll spin the roulette table and you'll just pop out somewhere. You'll pop out at some point over the last 6,000 years. You probably wouldn't be like, you'd probably be like, because you might get eaten. I mean, there's a story of a tourist that went to Polynesia and talked with the indigenous chief there. This is recently. And there was tourists that you could go and tour and talk with the chiefs. You can do that in Fiji and stuff. And the tourist saw this little church building. And he goes, oh, those Christians got over here, huh? Yeah, they got all over the place, And the chief goes, hey, wait a second. Just before you talk too much, do you know that if those missionaries hadn't showed up here, do you see that big rock right there, that big flat rock, and the big divot in the ground looks kind of like a cauldron in the rock over there? The tourist said, yeah. He said, that's where we'd be cutting you up right now, and we'd be cooking you and eating you for dinner tonight. So this is from a First Nations perspective. In Polynesia, I'm talking about Fiji, but we think, oh, that just happened, those headhunters just happened over there. No, in North America, Incas, Mayas, Aztecs, Iroquois, we're talking Coast Salish, the people on the BC, British Columbia coast. I'm in BC right now. And I love my First Nations brothers and sisters enough. I love them enough to say, we all need Christ. We all were broken, every culture. We're not meant to try to go back. We can redeem the things that are of value. We can redeem the things. Like, you got some herbal medicine, or you got some wonderful singing and drumming, I'm cool with that. But you're wanting to go back into a tribal fighting system of racism? No, that's not going to help us at all. Jesus said that you must be born again. And when you're born again, you're born of the Spirit and life. You're born in that water. You die with him. You're crucified and dead to the fallen human nature. You come out of that water. It's new life. You have your spiritual life is alive in you. It's the difference between just an egg and the sperm going into the egg. It's the difference between caterpillar and butterfly. A butterfly is, born again from a cocoon. And the caterpillar is a destructive animal in the sense that they can eat, kill trees by eating the leaves. A butterfly is actually an animal that pollinates and gives life. So isn't that cool? Anyway, so let's love one another, look to Jesus, and not put up with any lies on either side. Love you.